Tenants of a large residential building are complaining that they can hear each other's phone conversations, and your team has been called in to help fix the situation. So people are hearing from one unit to another through the demising walls. Where are you likely to first look for a way to make this situation better? And our answers are phone outlet locations. So like we could put the phones farther away from each other. That is such an old school answer. I can't even believe it. Most of you probably don't even have an actual phone, like a wired phone. But conceptually, you could have the phones be farther away from each other, and that would be helpful. The IIC assemblies, C would be the wall assembly to get a better STC. D would be the NRC ratings of finished materials. So let's digest a few of these. So IIC is going to be the installation impact class. So that is a viable answer for thinking about sound between units. Typically, though, when you're talking about IIC, not always, but typically what you're actually talking about is the impact sound of somebody walking on a floor and the sound of that impact coming through to the unit below. There's a bunch of other similar things that it can be referring to, but that's sort of the classic. For example, somebody walking around in high heels and you have that kind of intense click sound, that is translating through the materials in a very specific way. And so the IIC can help you deal with that and sort of understand what those numbers are. That's not really what this is talking about, though. This is talking about phone conversations. Well, let's look at the NRC. So the NRC, the concept of the NRC is the noise reduction coefficient of materials. So the classic version of the NRC that you would be using, and probably many of you have used already, and you just may or may not have realized it, is you're in, say, an office space, and you're going to put up some ceiling panels. Well, those ceiling panels all have very specific NRC, and the idea is that the sound that's in a room, right? So I've got a room, and I've got people standing in that room, and other people trying to work in that room, and various things happen, and these people are chatting, and so their sound is bouncing off the ceiling and coming down and bothering the people who are trying to get some work done. Well, if this ceiling is made out of a material that has a very useful NRC rating, then quite a bit of that sound is just going to get lost up there in that ceiling in the little crevices and get absorbed into the material. And so very, very little of it will actually come down and bother the people who are trying to work in the room. So NRC also very useful in thinking about how to maintain a reasonable amount of sound in a room, in a space, but doesn't really have that much to do. It's related to and has something to do, but doesn't have that much to do with the transmission of sound from one room to another. When you have two rooms next to each other and you're worried about the transmission of sound, so I've got something that's making sound on one side, say a drum, and it's making sound over here, and that sound is going through that wall and then finding its way into the other space. That is about the STC ratings. So that's the sound transmission class. I always get the C class and coefficient mixed up, but I'm pretty sure it's sound transmission class. And so the answer here is going to be C. And walls with pretty terrible sound transmission numbers are going to be down in the kind of high 30s, like a 38 or 39. Ones with really high might be up in the high 60s, something like that. Sort of typical for a demising wall you'd be looking for would be somewhere in the high 50s up to 60 in that range. And the STC ratings are kind of interesting. They're really focused on understanding the transmission of the pitches of most human voices. And the reason for that is those are the ones that are really irritating to people. If you can hear half of a phone conversation, it drives you crazy. So they're really aimed at that. And the reason that they're aimed at that is because if you actually tried to make a wall that could block out all sound, it would be very, very difficult. Like think of all those times you're outside on the street and you hear a car coming and you hear that bass from somebody listening to music and you're thinking, God, is it only bass? What's going on? Well, that's just the pitch that's getting out of the car. The rest of it's being contained in the car. Well, this same kind of situation, if you actually had somebody banging a drum on one side, having an STC rating of 58 isn't going to do much. That drum sound is going to go through, but it's also not going to bother you as much because it's not going to engage your brain in the same way that being able to hear somebody's conversation would. So it's good to get to know these different terminologies, IIC, STC, NRC, and how they sort of work, because it is likely you're going to get some acoustic questions somewhere on the exam, specifically on PDD.